Some more gum leaves. This time it's a different species of gum leaf. I'm going to look at the green, how to make this lovely silvery green. I'm going to look at different ways of painting the leaves and then paint the leaves all together. How do we make this lovely silver green? So over here I've got Viridian, a Holbein Viridian green tube, and I've squeezed a bit out. If this is a little colour wheel, you'd have yellow up the top, you'd have blue over here. I'm putting a B for blue and an R for red, and green sits between yellow and blue. So I'm going to put a square there for where Viridian sits, and I'm just going to put a little bit on. I'm going to use it. If you want to grey down any colour, you use its complement. That would be red. So I am going to use this super old tube of red. It is a little bit hard to see. It's carmine, it's alizarin carmine. To make a grey-green, I'm going to mix them together. So I'm going to use the same little tiny brush, and with a little bit of water on this small brush, I'm going to pick up this green and just spread it around so it's green up here, and then spread it down towards the red, and then pick up the tiniest bit of that red and mix it in down here, and it's turned it immediately into a grey, which is what happens when you mix grey, red and green. But I didn't need that much red. That was the tiniest little bit of red, and I didn't need that much. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that up a little higher, and hopefully just that little soft bit of red, just a small amount of red, turns the green into a grey-green. I'm just making that a little bit neat there, and it's that grey-green that I'm going to be painting with. The two together would make grey, but because I only mixed a tiny little bit of red, then I'm going to get a grey-green. So in this little sector below my little colour swatches here, I'm going to look at the first two ways of painting this grey leaf. So my first step therefore is to mix up a batch of that grey-green. Okay, under my palette I'm putting some Viridian, and I've got some, I'm going to put most of that Viridian in the center and pick up a tiny bit, oh that was too much, little bit of the carmine and mix it, and it immediately greyed it down. It's a really beautiful green, but not the one I'm after, a grey-green. So I'm going to do a little bit more and just keep going, adding little bits of red till I get to a grey-green that I like. A little bit more, a lot like adding salt. Do a little bit, and a little bit, and a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is grab a little test piece of paper and have a little look at it. How does it look? That's it's in its really dark version. And then I'm going to get another brush, wet it, and pick up some of that. And that's how it looks when it's painted out. It's a grey-green, and that's what I'm after to paint these lovely leaves. So in one we're going to lift out, and one we're going to paint negatively. So both of them are going to get a lovely pale wash of this grey-green. So this one is going to be left to dry. It is a little tiny bit kind of bumpy up the end of it, so I'm going to include little bumpy kind of marks there. Just make it a little more authentic. And same over here, just a little, because it's not smooth, it's a little bit bumpy. And this is going to get the same pale wash, staring at it to have a look at the detail. And on the bottom, it's really hard to see the veins on the bottom, but you can just see the lovely little brown dotty bits. On the top, they are, oh, they're a different kind of green. They're like the green on the back. So I'm going to paint in a layer, just like this one. Paint a layer. We'll do the veins 2 ways. And then I'm going to quickly paint the other one as well. I'm ignoring the branch, you can see. And then I'm going to go to my little tiny liner brush and pick up the darker green from my palette. I'm just going to watch it for a minute to check that those little veins don't completely dissipate. And while I'm keeping an eye on it, I'm going to put in a little branch, and it's brown. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of burnt umber from my palette, a little tiny bit of burnt umber, and put in a little branch. I'm going to let it touch the base of the wet one there. And I'll put this one in as well. It's still a tiny bit damp, which is quite nice because they're so integrated that it's logical that you do it at the same time. I'm lifting off little bits off the brown. You could lift off, you could make it darker on one side. It's no longer wet enough for me to lift off with this tiny brush. So I'm going to switch brushes in a second. Got this really tiny little filbert. I'm going to wet it and lift off, just so that there's a bit of tonal variation there. Tonal, just lifting off a little bit of colour on one side. Lifting, just takes a few seconds, a little bit of patience there. This is a little bit dark at the base, so I put on just a little bit too much paint, so I'm going to lift off a little bit there as well while I'm here. You can see the little tiny bits of green going onto my tissue. They're just little tiny bits of paint. So up here we've done colour testing to get the grey that we're happy with. Here we're looking at 2 methods of painting veins. And then down here, and we'll use both these methods when we paint the gum leaves. And down here, we need to look at our composition. Where will we place the leaves? So a little bit of designing down here. So I know my orientation is like that. It's a portrait orientation. So I'm going to do 3 of those so that I can decide on my composition. So I've got these beautiful leaves in front of me. So it makes me go, oh, well, I could do 1 leaf like that and 1 like that. And fill the space with, you know, leaves, 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 leaves like this, leaves, leaves. And will I do a leaf that I could do bigger leaves down there? And so that's one option. I could have them so that neither of them go off the page. I could have it a bit like that. So there's leaves, leaves like that, leaves, 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 leaves and a big leaf there, but that's just a boring version of that one. I'm preferring that one. So you know, the sky's the limit in terms of what your composition is. I could have it coming down the opposite, as though it's on the tree and it's hanging down, so it comes this way and it goes off like that, and then I have the leaves like that, and there's the bigger leaves down the bottom, and I don't have to have both of those leaves. And I quite like that one. I quite like that idea that it's hanging down, so that's what I'm going to go for. I'm going to turn it in the direction that I've decided to sketch it. The reality is, actually, when I went to pick it from the tree, it was going all over the place. So some of the branches were pointing upwards, some of them were pointing down, some of them were coming towards me, but some of them really were, lots of them really were hanging down. So I'm happy with that. That's not a problem. So now I've decided it's going to have a single branch to come down here. I'm sketching it in a 2B, so I'm hoping you'll be able to see my design. And then there's this enormous leaf. So it's actually attached right up there. All right. I'm pretty happy with my design. I've drawn a series of leaves. Oh, by the way, this is dry enough now for us to come back and give it a second light to do the other method of creating veins, which is to paint negatively. I'm going to use the same batch of grey. I'm going to use a slightly smaller quill and keep the leaf there. And I think the first thing I'll do is paint one side completely before I come in and do individual veins. Paint one side. There's the vein popping out, and then over this side I will do the same. Here's the central vein, and I'll put in a little extra, see if I can do some little tiny veins on the side as well. And so this has got negative, they've both got negative veins painted. And now I'm going to paint the lovely ones over here. I'm going to keep it in views. And I'm going to paint most of these with this method of the wet and wet. I like it. This is the top. I'm just checking if any of them are any of them showing their bottom half, and that is the only one that's showing the bottom half. Everything else is going to be the same lovely silver. So I'm going to do lots of this wet in wet which means that I'm going to use 2 brushes the whole way. This is my pale green. I think I'll add a tiny dash more of red. And just double check that I like the grey-green, and I do. And I'm going to give this one a whole coat. I might just attempt to remove a little more. Just take off some of that excess pencil and paint the whole thing in this pale grey. I'm going to actually leave that line unpainted because just occasionally I lose my pencil line, and I don't want to lose that lovely line that I spent a while drawing. So I'm just going to negatively paint it, and then I'll know exactly where that line was. Sometimes I've removed too much pencil and I can't see where I was going. There. That will remind me that that line went up that way. I'm going to leave that to dry and then paint some of it with a slightly darker tone. Okay, the leaves from here on in are going to be wet in wet. So I'm going to paint one. And then grab the darker, thicker mix and paint the vein. There, 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 like that. Back to my pale grey. And straight in with my veins each time. Back to my pale grey. This one's got lots of eaten bits. And here's my dark mix. Back to my pale grey. This one's on top of the stem. Now I'm getting to this tricksy bit where I have to decide what I'm going to do about the stem that goes in front of the leaf down here, because I haven't painted the leaf yet. I haven't painted the stem, sorry. Okay, and there's this central vein, side vein, central, side. That one was a little too wet for my wet and wet veins to work, but I'm going to ignore it. So I'm going to negatively paint these ones, go around that stem. I'm just letting these all join up, and then I'll paint a darker mix later. Oh, it comes down there. But while it's wet, I'm picking up my thick mix and the stem, not the stem, I keep saying stem, but I mean vein. The central vein comes out there. Redo that one, see if it's just dried a little bit so that I can, yeah, that's better. It's going to be a little darker than the other ones, than the other leaves now, but it doesn't really matter. This one comes over here, and here's the central vein. So I'm just going to paint that separately because, again, I'll forget where that mark is. So I'm just going to negatively paint I'll just get rid of that excess off my brush. Negatively paint it so then I will remember where that vein ran. And I'm going to go one side of that vein. And vein, 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 vein. And here's my pale. Negatively painting the stem again. Definitely stem this time, I've got the right name. I'm not worried about them touching. And the stem goes down like that. Vein, 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 vein. And then I'm up to this one. Back to my pale wash. Oh, just remove all that excess moisture because it's a little tiny leaf and I don't want it too wet. Oh, when I make this video, I'm so going to be adding a soundtrack whenever I can to get rid of that horrible background noise. Vein, boom, boom. Just putting in little tiny details there. Pale wash. This one. And while I'm here, I'm going to paint a few. I'm really getting my groove going now, painting wise. And that one I also know is a tiny bit wet. This one is a tiny bit wet as well. So I'm just going to keep traveling down. I'm going to do 3 at once, I reckon, this rate. Negatively painting the stem here. There, and straight into my dark mix. Vein, 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 vein. Yeah, that was worth waiting. Vein, 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 vein. This one goes, there's be the central vein, side vein, side vein. This one is completely on its side, and I don't think you see much of the vein at all. So I'm going to put a little bit, give it a little layer. This one is behind the stem, behind, and I'll just invent a bit, make it nice. Vein, 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 vein. By the time I've gotten to the bottom, this one is it dry? Wow, it's nearly dry enough for me to add a tone. I think I'll just go for it. I'm going to use this pale wash. The stem goes along there. Oh, it's not near dry enough. It just ran totally into it. Doesn't matter. I'm just going for it anyway. There. And I'm going to do vein, vein, vein. I hope I didn't completely stuff that just now. Put in a darker vein there and a little bit of tone on that side. Just going to use a flat brush to massage that out. God, that's an annoying noise. Fuck. Just fixing my mistake where I was way impatient. Hopefully I haven't completely ruined the leaf, but I will be able to tell later. So the vein itself is a yellow-green. It's a yellow-grey-green. So what I'm going to do is use some of this green that I've got going here and mix it with a bit of yellow and come up with a yellow-green that I like. And the vein is going to be yellow-green with dots of brown. That's wet, so I'm going to avoid that bit. I'll come back to it. It's a yellow-green. And then it's got tiny little dots of brown. I've got another brush. I'm picking up some burnt umber. And it's got heaps of... It's too wet for the burnt umber to show, so I'll wait another minute. Then it comes down here. Joins them, and it goes between the leaves. Just reloading because my brush is so tiny. Comes down here and it goes here. I'm going to leave a little bit of white space. So I so carefully painted that negatively that I'm going to leave the bit of white space, and it'll give me options. So easy to cover if I really don't want to see the white space, but I might quite like it. Now the little brown bits are just showing. I want to put in little tiny bits of brown. All the way along it's got little brown bits. Brown, brown, brown. There. It's possibly still too wet to paint that one up the top. Yeah, way wet when I touch it. Now, what's next? These ones here. I'm doing more stems. It comes out of there. That hits that leaf. That's the stem there. That's the stem there. And that's the stem there. It's one of those now you see me, now you don't. And I'll come back in with my burnt umber, put in lots of little brown bits all the way along the stem or branch. And there's heaps of brown bits as it goes up the top there. So here's my more yellow-green. I'm just going to try not to touch it. Back to my burnt umber, put in lots of little marks. A little bit of brown there. And oops, I bumped my camera, and apologies there. I'm just settling the camera again. All right, I think I'm just about done. I need to get this dry and then correct it. And I've got a bit of brown on my brush, so I'm going to drop in a little bit. So, oh, it's still quite wet, interestingly. And it's got a little bit of brown on the end here as well. So the brown on my brush is quite dry. And it's a nice opportunity just to put in little browny bits with a dry brush. Gives a little bit of a texture. Texture. Make them quite imperfect with a little bit of this brown, especially here where it's been eaten away. It's be brown at the edges, and I'm just going to repaint that bit there, because that's where it turns over, and paint it with the darker green mix. Looks really dark because it's wet, so I'm just feathering it out with water in case it is much darker, because I only wanted a tiny bit darker, as though you can see the other side of that leaf. When this is dry, I need to indicate that this leaf is on top. And again, when this is dry, I'll indicate that this leaf is on top. Oh, I reckon I can do that bit. Little bit of the pale green, and I'm going to just indicate that side of that leaf. Just doing a little bit of negative painting just for to kind of finish that leaf off. Where else? This one is in front of that one. Is that dry enough? Yeah, I reckon it is. Tiny bit of paint to say what's behind and what's in front. That's behind that one. And that's behind that leaf. Has this wonderful shape. That needs a little bit of tone there. And there. And that one is in front. I'm just making them all in front. So I'm going to paint the one behind. Paint that one as well. That one's behind. Just little tiny details to indicate who's at the front and who's at behind. That's behind. A little bit of tone there. Little bit. Bit of tone there. Bit of tone on that one. And I'm done. As soon as that's dry, I'll just correct it that little bit. and then it's done. Is it dry enough? Oh, I think I'll just go for it. I want that to sit on top. Just going to indicate that goes like that. All right, that's better. A little tiny bit of dark just there. I'm just darkening up some of those veins a little bit. There, now I'm done. All right, it's ready for me to sign. There's not much space here to sign my whole name, Marion Chapman. So what I could do is sign it on the side. I think I like that idea. It's a very vertical piece, so I'm going to turn it around and pick up the same grey batch and sign my name, Marion Chapman. And if I move these leaves out of the way, you can see the completed work now. We've got the colours, 2 methods of doing the leaves, 3 different compositional ideas, and then the completed piece as well. So I'm Marion Chapman, and I love that you came with me today to paint in watercolour. Please make a comment and like and subscribe, which will encourage me to do more. If you've got any questions, make a comment. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear anything at all that you've got to say. And until next week, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. See you. Bye.